Even in the darkest of times, there is always a tiny glimmer of hope waiting to be found. We tell the stories of those who followed the light and found their way through the storm to a better tomorrow. Hit subscribe now and keep the hope alive.
My son-in-law didn't just embarrass my daughter at her own graduation party. He did it in front of 40 people with a smile on his face, like it was the funniest thing in the world. I want to tell you what happened. All of it. Because I've been carrying this story for almost 3 years now, and I think it's time someone heard it the right way. My daughter's name is Renata. She's 31 years old, and she has her mother's eyes, dark brown, the kind that catch light in a room and hold it. Her mother passed when Renata was 19. Breast cancer. Fast and cruel, the way it always is. After that, it was just the two of us. I worked at the post office for 26 years, sorted mail, drove routes, came home tired. She studied. God, how she studied. She put herself through nursing school on scholarships and part-time shifts at a diner, and when she walked across that stage to get her RN license, I cried in the second row, and I am not ashamed of it. His name is Spencer. Spencer Aldridge. He came from money. Not old money. Not the kind with history, but new money. The loud kind. His father owned a chain of auto dealerships in 3 counties, and Spencer had grown up knowing that most problems disappeared if you wrote a check or raised your voice. He was 34 when they met. Renata was 27. She thought he was confident. I thought he was something else, but I kept that to myself because she was happy, and she hadn't been happy in a long time. The first time I met Spencer, he shook my hand too hard. That's a small thing. People shake hands too hard, but then he looked around my living room, at the worn couch, the ceramic lamp I've had since 1987, the framed photo of Renata and her mother on the shelf, and something moved across his face. Not contempt exactly, more like assessment. Like he was calculating what kind of people lived here and what they were worth. I filed it away. They dated for 2 years. In that time, I noticed things. The way he interrupted her when she was talking to other people, but never when he was talking to other people. But never when he was talking. The way he summarized her opinions for her, usually slightly wrong. The way he'd laugh at her small mistakes in front of company. Not mean laughter. The kind that passes for affection, that makes the other person feel they're being too sensitive if they flinch. Renata didn't flinch. She laughed along. That worried me more than anything. His mother, Connie Aldridge, was a tall woman with a talent for packaging cruelty as concern. She called Renata sweetie in a way that felt like a lid being pressed down. The first time Renata brought a dish to a family dinner, her mother's lasagna recipe, which I'd watched her make 100 times. Connie took one bite, set down her fork, and said, "Oh, how interesting. Spencer's never mentioned you like to cook." She said it to the table, not to Renata. Everyone smiled. Renata smiled too. I drove home that night with my hands tight on the wheel. The engagement happened on a beach in Florida, photographed professionally, posted to social media with 47 comments calling it perfect. I called Renata that night. She was glowing through the phone. I told her I was happy for her. I was happy for her. I just wasn't happy about him. I started doing something then that I hadn't planned. It was slow at first. A decision here, a conversation there. I've been living simply since her mother died. Not poorly, but carefully. The house was paid off. I had savings I'd never touched because I didn't need to. Her mother and I had bought a second property back in 2003. A small rental house 2 streets over. The kind of investment we'd made because we wanted something real to leave behind. After her mother died, I kept renting it. Kept the income in a separate account. Kept quiet about it. I started transferring things into Renata's name. Slowly. Legally. I talked to a lawyer. A woman named Christine who had handled our family's paperwork for years. And I told her what I was seeing and what I was afraid of. She listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. Then she told me exactly how to structure things, so that what I was giving Renata couldn't be claimed as marital property. Couldn't be touched in a divorce. Couldn't be reached by someone who thought he owned the woman he'd married. I didn't tell Renata. Not yet. I wanted to wait for the right moment, and I wasn't sure when that would be. The graduation party was Spencer's idea. Renata had finished her BSN, a bachelor's in nursing science she'd pursued while working full-time, and Spencer said they should celebrate at his parents' house. Bigger space, he said. Better setup. His family would be there, a few of their friends, some of Renata's colleagues from the hospital. I said I'd come early to help set up. Spencer said there was no need, everything was handled. I came early anyway. When I arrived, the backyard was already arranged. White tablecloths, a catering company, flowers on every surface. Connie was directing people with the composure of someone who had never once doubted her own taste. She greeted me at the gate with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "Harold, so good of you to come." She always called me Harold. My name is Henry. I found Renata in the kitchen. She looked beautiful. A blue dress, her hair pinned up, nervous and lit up at the same time the way she always got before something mattered. I hugged her and she held on a beat longer than usual. "You okay?" I said quietly. "Yes," she said. "I'm fine. I'm good." The party went smoothly for the first hour. People ate, people laughed. Renata's colleagues told stories about the hospital that made everyone cringe, and then laugh harder. I sat next to a retired school teacher named Beverly, who'd been a neighbor of the Aldridges for 20 years, and who told me, without me asking, that Connie had once returned a casserole dish without washing it and never mentioned it. I stored that away too. Then came the gift portion of the evening, Spencer's idea, again. Not a traditional thing, but Spencer liked a moment, liked a room's attention pointed in his direction. He tapped his glass, gathered everyone, and said they wanted to celebrate Renata properly. First came his gift. A weekend at a spa upstate, presented in a gold envelope with a card that he read aloud, which was mostly about his own support during her studies. People applauded. Renata smiled. Then Connie stood up. She held a wrapped box, medium-sized, tied with a yellow ribbon. She made a speech first, the kind that's structured like a compliment, but built from something else underneath. She said how proud she was that Renata had finally finished her degree. She said that nurses worked so hard, and the family respected that, truly. She said she hoped Renata understood that a career was important, but so was the home, and Spencer was a busy man who needed a partner who understood that. Then she held out the box and said, "This is something practical, something to remind you of what really matters." Renata unwrapped it at the table, all 40 people watching. Inside was an apron. Not a regular apron. A formal one. The kind with a bib, white cotton. The sort a professional housekeeper wears. Pressed and folded. And beneath it, a laminated card with a printed cleaning schedule. Weekly tasks. Daily tasks. A note at the bottom in Connie's handwriting. "The house won't run itself, sweetie." There was a beat of silence. 2 beats. Then Spencer laughed. That relaxed, easy laugh he had. The one that smoothed over rooms. "She's not wrong," he said. And a few people laughed too, uncertain. Renata held the apron in her hands and looked at it. Her face did something complicated. She glanced at Spencer. He was still smiling. She put the apron down on the table and said quietly, "Thank you, Connie." I stood up. I don't know exactly what the room thought I was going to do. I'm 63 years old. I'm not a large man, and I was wearing the blazer Renata had bought me for Christmas 2 years ago. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't angry, not in the hot way. I was something colder and more certain. I said, "Before we move on, Renata, I have something for you too." I picked up the envelope from the chair beside me. Plain manila. Nothing on the outside. I walked to her and I set it down in front of her. She looked at me. I nodded. She opened it. Inside was a deed. The rental property on Calder Street, transferred fully into her name 6 weeks prior, verified and recorded. Alongside it, a letter from Christine's office summarizing the legal protections on the asset, sole, and separate property, non-marital, held in Renata's name alone. Renata looked at the deed. Then she read it again. Her hands were very still. "Read it out loud," I said softly. "The address." She read it. Her voice was steady. 314 Calder Street. I said, "That's yours. Has been for 6 weeks. The tenants pay on the 1st of every month. It covers your car payment and then some. The title is clean. The mortgage is paid off. And nothing in that envelope belongs to anyone in this room except you." Renata looked up at me, and I watched something change in her face. Not tears yet. Something before tears. The recognition of something she hadn't known she was missing. Spencer had stopped smiling. He said, "What does that mean?" I looked at him the way I used to look at envelopes I couldn't quite read. Patient, focused, taking my time. "It means your wife has a property in her name. Solely her name." I paused. "It means she has options." Connie set her glass down too carefully. Spencer said, "Henry, I don't think this is the place." "You made it the place," I said. Not loud, not sharp, just true. "When your mother stood up and handed my daughter a cleaning schedule at her graduation party, you laughed. I thought that was the place for a lot of things, actually." No one spoke. Beverly, the school teacher, took a long sip of her wine. I sat back down. Renata held the deed in both hands. Her colleagues were quiet. A few of them exchanged looks, the kind that meant they'd seen enough at the hospital to know exactly what had been playing out in his backyard. Spencer spoke to Renata in a low voice after that, leaning toward her, the smile completely gone. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the register, the private urgency, the "you'll hear about this later" of it. I watched her face as he spoke. She didn't lean in. She kept the envelope in her lap, both hands around it, and she looked at the tablecloth. The party wound down fast after that. Connie busied herself with the catering staff. Spencer refilled his drink twice in 15 minutes. Renata walked me to my car when I left, and we stood on the sidewalk in the warm October evening. She said, "How long have you been planning this?" "About 14 months, I said. She was quiet for a moment. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't want you to talk me out of it," I said, "or feel like you owed me something before you'd made any decisions." She looked at the envelope. "Dad, it's yours," I said. "Full stop. Whatever you decide about your life, that's yours. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just making sure you have somewhere to stand when you decide." She cried then, finally, standing on the sidewalk while the catering van idled at the end of the driveway. Not the quiet kind, the kind that's been stored up. I held on until she was done. I want to be clear about something. I didn't give Renata that property to end her marriage. I gave it to her because I had watched for 2 years a capable woman slowly adjust herself to fit inside a space that was getting smaller. I gave it to her because her mother would found a way to do the same thing, and I was the only one left who could. I gave it to her because a cleaning schedule left in a gift box at a graduation party isn't just a joke. It's a statement about what someone believes you are worth. And I needed my daughter to have something in her hands that said something different. She called me 3 weeks later. She'd spoken to Christine. She had questions about the property, about her rights, about what a separation would look like if it came to that. I answered what I could. I told her Christine would answer the rest. 2 months after that, she moved out. Spencer's family was loud about it. Connie called me once. I let it go to voicemail, and I have never listened to it. Spencer told mutual acquaintances that I had interfered, that I had manipulated Renata, that the property transfer had been some kind of calculated move to end his marriage. Maybe he was right about the calculated part. I don't lose sleep over it. What I lose sleep over is the 2 years before I acted, the dinners I sat through, the small corrections I watched pass without comment, the way Renata apologized once in front of me for burning a piece of toast. Apologized to him for toast. I should have moved faster. I know that, but here is what I also know. When Renata walks into a room now, she doesn't adjust herself before she speaks. She doesn't check a face across the table before she laughs. She bought a plant for the kitchen window of the apartment she rents, a big, sprawling thing she doesn't know the name of and waters inconsistently and talks to occasionally, she told me, which made me laugh harder than I had in months. She still has the deed. The tenants are still paying. She started a savings account that I'm not allowed to ask about, which tells me it's going well. She came over for dinner last Sunday. She brought bread from a bakery near her apartment. We sat at the kitchen table where she'd done homework for 20 years, and she told me about a patient she'd had that week. A woman in her 70s who'd been alone and frightened, and who Renata had stayed late to sit with. Just sit with, because sometimes that's the whole of what medicine is. She's a good nurse. She's a good person. She always was. I just needed to make sure she had somewhere to stand. I set the table the way her mother used to. Bread in the middle. Everything else around it. We ate and we talked. And outside the window, the oak tree in the yard was going orange and gold, the way it does every October without fail. I thought about her mother. I think about her mother most days, but Sunday evenings especially. I think she would have handled all of this better than I did and faster. She always saw people more clearly than I did, but I got there. Maybe late, maybe slow, but I got there. And when I look at Renata now, really look at her, across a table, in the ordinary light of a Sunday evening, I see her mother's eyes catching the light and holding it. That's enough. That's more than enough. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all this happened. Not in any grand or abstract way, just the ordinary kind of thinking you do when you're washing dishes at night and the house is quiet and you keep turning something over in your mind. Spencer didn't become who he was overnight. Neither did Connie. People like that are built slowly, one unanswered moment at a time. Every room that laughed along, every table that went quiet and moved on, every woman who smiled and said thank you when what she'd been handed was an insult wrapped in ribbon. What they did to Renata at that party wasn't an accident or a slip. It was the behavior of people who had never once been held still and made to look at what they were doing. That's not fate. That's just the math of how people work. You act without consequence long enough, you stop believing consequences exist. And Renata, I want to be honest here, because I think she deserves that. Renata had learned to make herself smaller in ways she didn't fully see yet. That wasn't weakness. I want to be clear about that. It was intelligence pointed in the wrong direction. She was smart enough to know when to go quiet, perceptive enough to read a room, disciplined enough to hold herself together when she should have been allowed to fall apart. Those are real qualities. They just got used for the wrong purpose for too long. That's what a controlling environment does. It takes your best tools and turns them into survival mechanisms. Her intelligence, her patience, her self-control, all of it got redirected into keeping peace in a house that didn't deserve peace. What I gave her wasn't a rescue. I want to be clear about that too, because I think there's a difference. A rescue is when someone pulls you out of the water. What I did was closer to making sure she always knew where the shore was. The deed to that house on Calder Street didn't change who Renata was. It just gave her a place to stand while she remembered it herself. The hardest part of being a parent, and I mean this is the truest thing I know, is watching someone you love figure something out on their own timeline, not yours. I saw what Spencer was inside of 6 months. I kept quiet for 2 years. I don't fully forgive myself for that, and I don't think I need to, because that discomfort is useful. It reminds me that caring about someone isn't the same as acting for them. I cared the whole time. I should have acted sooner. But here is what I also believe. The effort matters. The 14 months of careful, quiet work. The conversations with Christine. The paperwork filed on a Tuesday morning when nobody was watching. Renata didn't see any of it, but it was all for her. That's what real effort looks like most of the time. Not dramatic, not witnessed, just steady. You do the work because the work needs doing, and you trust that it will matter when the moment comes. It came. And when Renata walked out of that house 2 months later, she wasn't running from something. She was walking towards something she already owned. There's a difference in how a person carries themselves when that's true. I noticed it the first time I saw her after she moved out. She stood in my doorway with a bag of groceries, and she looked like herself. The self she'd been at 19, before the adjustment started, before she learned to check someone's face before she spoke. That's what I was trying to get back. That version of my daughter, standing in a doorway not checking anything. I got it, re-got it. That's the whole story, and it's enough.